What's holding Tony Romo back from being great with NFL and CBS? This is with Uncle Colin Cowherd. So Tony Romo, very polarizing. When Tony Romo first became an analyst on CBS, people thought he was the greatest thing of all time. They thought he was generational. They thought his takes and just how he saw the game was so smart and so funny, and people loved it. Then he kind of fell off. There was even talk of CBS doing an intervention with Romo to try and get him back on track. He's kind of leveled out. He's kind of evened out a little bit, so he's got some positive reviews lately. I certainly trust Colin Cowherd's media acumen. He's one of, I would say, my role models when it comes to doing this. When I was back in the day, accurate days, when I was working in a plumbing warehouse, shout out Mississippi Coast Supply in Biloxi, Mississippi, I would sit in the warehouse and I would play sports talk radio all day. And I would listen to, at the time, Ryan Russillo and Scott Van Pelt's show. I would listen to The Herd. I would listen to Jim Rome's show. And Colin Cowherd kind of became a bit of a role model of how I would build my broadcast career, kind of how I would build a show, kind of how I would kind of attack this whole thing. So I definitely think Colin, I mean, I don't want to say genius. Genius is something that's thrown around a lot, but Colin is about as good as it gets when it comes to seeing media, understanding media, especially, obviously, when it comes to sports talk. So I'm interested to see what Colin has to say. I have my own thoughts about Romo, which, of course, we will share throughout this unbelievable reaction video.
I thought Romo and Nantz did have a good game. It's funny. They're going to move the deck chairs. I think the CBS pregame show, there wasn't a memorable moment. They're all nice guys, but I
think CBS's show is probably the weakest. Comparing them and Fox, I think Amazon's is probably the worst. But it's just one of those things where the same cast of characters, Bill Cowher, Phil Simms, Boomer Esiason, and it's time to go. It's time to move on. A lot of what they're talking about is very antiquated. It doesn't really hold up in today's game. They're just not seeing the game the same. A lot of them have pushed back on things like analytics and the way that the game is played. So with that, it's just time to move on. I like J.J. Watt. He was included. I like him. Kind of lukewarm on Nate Burleson, but I think a lot of those shows do need to get younger, do need to get some fresh ideas, fresh faces. Like I said, Fox is probably the best. It's not great. Then I would say probably CBS, and then way behind that is Amazon. If they need to look at a example of a show that's doing good, I would look at TNT. TNT's pregame show in the NBA obviously is really good, but what they've done with their hockey broadcast is incredible. They brought in, Wayne Gretzky's in there, Biz from Barstool Sports. They've got some goofs, some gaffes. It's very similar to how the NBA pregame show is done, and TNT's got it figured out. So Fox and CBS and whoever else, they need to model what TNT is doing. That's the future, I think, of these pregame, postgame shows.
It doesn't have a lot of oomph to me. It's kind of, Fox has had that crew. It's like TNT basketball. It's just better than ESPN's. What are you going to say? It's Barkley, it's Shaq, it's Kenny, it's Ernie. I think the Fox crew's been doing it. It's a little older in the tooth, but it's just good. It's been good for a long time. It's smartly produced. Bill Richards. It's great pieces, funny enough. And the CBS crew's okay to me. NBC at night, very okay to me.
Oh, NBC, I wasn't even thinking about that. NBC, the Sunday night might be the worst. Nah, it's better than Amazon. It is better than Amazon's so bad. Amazon's like watching an improv crew try and do it. They're all just rotating one-liners, no chemistry at all. That's real bad. But the Sunday night football is, I always joke, me and my friends always joke around that it's basically like Benadryl. It is the ultimate Sunday night, just like put you to sleep, end the weekend, Tony Dungy, take me home. I mean, it is as just bland as it possibly gets.
Oh, terrible.
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
Not you.
But I thought Romo and Nantz were pretty good. I thought they were good. And I think, Tony is just kind of a squirrely, fun personality. Tony's the kind of guy that if you went out golfing with him, you'd have a ball. Yeah. He'd tell you a million stories. And sometimes he can be a little bit loose.
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to say. If I had to give I'll give my thoughts on Romo, just so it doesn't sound like I'm copying Colin, just in case we say the same thing here. But I think Romo's problem is that he does not take the game seriously. I think Romo is very loose. I think he's very casual. I think his viewership is very casual. That's been a lot of the gripes about Romo, is that he doesn't watch the games. He doesn't really know the game that much anymore as far as like the players and all that. He's just kind of shooting from the hip, kind of coming from the cuff, and that's just going to be who he is. And I think at the beginning, people thought Romo was going to be this unbelievable like knowledge, just drop in every play. He was going to predict plays and read defenses, and he just understood every single aspect of the game. That's just not the case. That's not how it is. That's not who Tony Romo is. Colin's right. I think Romo is a dude's dude. I think if you played golf with Romo, you'd have the time of your life. I think if you went to the bar with Romo or went to a Hooters, you'd have a ton of fun. But he's just a guy. He's not. He would much rather be in a fantasy football league than breaking down like deep analytics. And that's just Romo. So if you're okay with that, I think Romo's fine. But Romo, even in the Super Bowl or certainly during playoff games, Romo gets like late game stuff wrong all the time. And he'll say, they need to let him score here, or I'd burn a timeout here, or I'd go for it here. And it's just completely wrong. It's completely out of nowhere. And Nantz usually pushes back. Like, it's so obviously wrong. Nantz is even like, I don't know about that, Tony. So you got to kind of, I think that's, if we accept that, I think Romo's fine. He was put on this pedestal that people just had the wrong impression of him. So Romo's found his niche a little bit. He's found who he is in the booth, and that's just that casual, fun, football's not that serious kind of guy. Now, is that perfect for a playoff game? Is that perfect for the Super Bowl? Probably not. You probably want commentators who understand the seriousness of the game and the seriousness of the situation. Romo is probably better for regular season broadcasts or even like Monday Night Footballs. Thursday night, he'd be great at, but I think the problem is he's just not meshing with the playoff game atmosphere or the big game atmosphere.
But I thought he did. I thought it was one of Tony's Romo's better broadcasts. I thought he started calling things very quickly. One of the things he kept saying is, he'd be like, oh, this drive hurts. Or he kept saying, I thought it was really smart. He goes, okay, that whatever you just saw there, that was a designed Shanahan play. He was calling that throughout the game. He would give the coach credit, not just the player. And that's important. There's a distinction there that we always give the quarterback credit. And he would say with at the end, he's like, that's an Andy Reid play. Mahomes is great. That's an Andy Reid play. So what is your take? I think Nantz and Romo are fine. I do think once he signed that $17 million a year contract, he became a target. And once you're a target, it's hard.
I don't know if the money was the bigger deal, but people just, like I said, they were expecting Romo to do one thing, and then he did the total opposite, and then people really pushed back on it. People did not like that he seemed to be really loose with the broadcast. People thought he'd be much more analytical and much more serious about these broadcasts. So when he came on and he was just kind of like your funny uncle talking sports, people were like, what the hell is this? We came here for Tony Romo to be this quarterback, the insight from a former like great quarterback. We didn't come here for yucks and 5 minutes of stand-up comedy. But that's just who Tony Romo is. So I think people got the wrong impression of Romo at first. He was a little more buttoned up, which you can't fault the guy. You're going to be more buttoned up. You're going to be more to the letter at the beginning of something like this. But then once you do it enough, you're just going to be you.
I think he got pigeonholed in the lane if he calls the plays, which is not a sustainable thing to do.
Yes.
And I think it is hard to be the goofier guy if you're not a little older. John Madden, when he started calling games, by the time I was a kid, was in his 50s, right, or 60s. Yeah. Gruden was already this massive personality by the time he got the booth. When I think about Troy Aikman, I think a guy, like, he'll crush some people. Troy Aikman's kind of an old school bat. He has that definitive lane. People kind of like that. Because a lot of announcers, the former players, they won't really be critical. Troy has no problem doing that.
Troy, Aikman has absolutely turned into, he's another one who's found his lane. And his lane is, he's unapologetically Troy Aikman. And he will crush, for sure. He will crush coaches and players. He will go against calls. And I think Aikman is way better right now than he ever has been. I think Aikman and Buck are probably the best, I would say. The best two to call a game. If I had to pick, I'd have them calling the Super Bowl and playoff games. And Middlekauff's right. Romo is the goofy, funny guy. And a lot of the times when you have a young, handsome, goofy, funny guy, that rubs a lot of people the wrong way. They don't like that. They don't want that. I think in one of Colin's books, he even talks about how it's hard if you're handsome to be a stand-up comedian because people don't want to give you the total package. We're going on a real tangent here. But it's always easier if it's like Chris Farley being the funny, goofy guy. People like that, right? They don't want Zac Efron to also be the funny, goofy guy. So Romo being young, rich, successful, funny, goofy, people are like, hold on a second. This is rubbing me the wrong way. If Tony Romo was 60 years old and doing the stuff he was doing and saying they should go for it here. They should, they should call a timeout here, and it was just wrong. People would laugh, and it'd be a goof. But that's not how they see Romo. So I do think it's a bit of a perfect storm of why he's catching a lot of flack, but I think the flack is definitely not going to stick. I think Romo, if he stays doing what he's doing, people just get used to it and they'll realize who he is, and I think he'll be fine.
That's why I enjoy that.
Yeah.
Collinsworth is just one of those unique guys.
I like Collinsworth.
I don't remember a play he ever made because by the time he was already retired by the time I was probably 10, but he's just good. And you watch Tony sometimes, he gets loosey goosey. Not really my style because he's never going to be that critical on moments where it's like, okay, Tony, but if you're not going to do that, you have to do something else. Yes. And he kind of lost his fastball once he stopped doing the plays and people thought he was starting getting lazy because what's he doing? He's never going, well, that's a terrible call when it obviously is. I think most people that sit on their couch now, we've all watched a lot of football. Some stuff's pretty obvious. Yeah. And when the announcers refuse because they're everybody's friends, they know these coaches, it's not that enjoyable, right? Why does Colin Cowherd have success? You're opinionated.
Well, that's a big shift, too, with announcers. I think John's right here, too, where the average fan is so much smarter. The average fan has so much more information. The average fan knows the ins and the outs, and they know who's good, who's not good. I mean, back in the day, and I'm talking 10 years ago, the average fan maybe played fantasy football. Now the average fan for sure plays fantasy football and more than likely has money on the game, which means they're probably informed of either why they took that bet or they're informed of what players are good, what players are bad, what defenses are good, what defenses are bad, and vice versa. So they expect the announcers to at least be putting in the same amount of work that they are. If an announcer comes out there and they're like, I think Mac Jones has had a pretty solid year this year, the person on the couch is like, my man, he's 28th in this, he's 27th in this, he's 25th in this. Don't insult my intelligence. They want, so that's a big change for the announcers. The announcers can't just get up there and wing it and let it rip. They have to be better because the information that we have is better. I mean, I put in, I know I wouldn't say I'm an average fan, but I put in, a casual, like 15 hours of ingesting data and content and every week in the NFL season. So come Sunday, Monday Night Football, I am locked in to the trends and the stats and the teams and the players and the matchups and all that and the situations and the data. So I'm not getting paid $17 million a year to call these games. So they should, at the minimum, do that. I think when Romo quit calling the plays, people assumed he was just showing up to the booth with, his golf clubs in one hand and a pina colada in the other hand, and he was just kind of being lazy about it. But that was never his shtick. His shtick wasn't, I can predict all these plays because I'm putting so much game film prep in. And he just maybe did that a few times at the very beginning, and then it kind of stuck because they became viral clips or whatever else. So that's what gave Romo that super lazy take. And back when we were talking about the intervention, that's what the talk was about. The intervention with CBS was basically going to tell Romo, like, hey, you have to prep. You have to prep for these games. The rumor back then was he was not prepping. He was not watching games. He was not doing anything. He was just showing up and calling. Whether that was true or not, more than likely the reason people believe that is because of what we're talking about here. He kind of seemingly lost his fastball, so people assumed, well, he must not be putting the work in.
You see something, you say it. And I think Tony was very hesitant to do that. In fairness to Peyton Manning, he's like, listen, I don't want to be critical. So he doesn't call the games, really. He just does the thing with Eli. But if you're going to sit in that chair, if you're going to be Tom, it's going to be hard. Like, Tom, people are going to want to hear you say, that's a terrible play call. Because we watched you play, and we know that's your style. Like, you get mad. And Peyton does it actually sometimes, too, and he immediately kind of goes viral because people like that. And I think Tony's always really struggled with that. Even today, tries to play nice with both guys. Like, Jim, I think you should go for it here. Just pick a lane, Tony. It's okay if you're wrong. But I think he's always he's always very hesitant, it feels like, to offend the coach because he knows these guys well. They all text him. He's buddies with them. And that to me is my criticism. He just won't say stuff when it's pretty obvious sometimes. I don't care about the play calls. I like having a little fun, whatever. But just say, that was a terrible freaking call, Jim. That cannot happen in that situation. He's just never going to. Or Troy, I would say Troy, especially once Tony got a lot of money, has no problem laying the law down. And people enjoy that.
Yeah, people do. And the rest of this video, by the way, they talk about the Super Bowl and then go on some other stuff. So this will be it for the Colin and Middlekauff part. But it's a good example of that is in New Orleans media right now, like in New Orleans sports media. So people hammer WWL because they do the interviews with Mickey Loomis and they do the interviews with Dennis Allen, and it's just softball question after softball question, especially during a tumultuous season like we just had. And then they come onto my channel and they're listening to me absolutely skewer Pete Carmichael or Dennis Allen or Mickey Loomis or whatever the situation is. Then they go to WWL and they're wondering, why aren't they doing the same thing? So the amount of options that people have in sports media, whether it's TikTok or Instagram Reels or Twitter or YouTube or podcasts or whatever, it's just a different playing field. Sports media, or media in general, is changing. You know, it really is. I've seen so many people say that I have a million comments of people saying that they listen to like my videos in the car on the way to work. That wasn't an option 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the option was you got to listen to whatever local radio station you got, or you're buying Sirius XM and you're listening to a national syndicated show like Jim Rome or Howard Stern or even Colin Cowherd. You know, so the landscape has changed. There's more options. More options creates competition, and when you have the heightened competition, the people at the very tippity top calling Monday Night Football, Sunday Night Football, playoff games, Super Bowl, they better be good, and they better be real good. So gone are the days of just two guys out there calling a game, just almost like background noise to the game. People want insight. People want insight. They want opinions. They want to know what's going on. They don't want a buddy just blasting their opinion in their ear. They want like hard-hitting analysis from these commentators. But it's an interesting conversation. I love getting in the weeds with sports media or just media in general, the digital content, all that stuff. So these conversations are fun, especially with someone as knowledgeable as Colin Cowherd. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Do you like Romo? Do you like who's your favorite commentators or pregame, postgame show? How do you kind of consume your media? What's your thoughts on the changing landscape? Thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next video.